Welcome to Exponential Chats, provided to you by Exponential Ventures. In this week's episode, we'll be talking about the recently unveiled brain-machine interface called the Link, created by the company named Neuralink, founded by Elon Musk. My name is Adriano Marques. I am the founder and CEO of Exponential Ventures. And today I have here with me Camilla Romero, Juan Silva, Harlei Vicente, Igor Muniz, and Fernando Camargo. Before we start our discussion, let's briefly set the stage here. Our brain is the ultimate hardware. As artificial intelligence engineers, we've been working hard to mimic the cognitive capacities of our brain, but we're still far away from achieving its amazing capabilities. Brains consume an incredibly low amount of energy, have an incredibly long longevity, and very low maintenance that no other artificial computing system or processor currently available can match. And yet, we still know very little about how it works and how to replicate it. One of the reasons is that the brain is a black box, and there are very few tools that we can use to acquire a limited idea of its inner workings. That is why we have the need to create tools to interface with the brain and acquire a better understanding of how it works. Not just to be able to replicate its technology, but mainly to be able to repair and improve it. Brain-machine interfaces are not new. We've had them for several decades, and the most primitive form is the EEG, or electroencephalography, which consists of the use of electrodes attached to your scalp to detect electrical activity in different regions of your brain. And the purpose of a brain-machine interface, or brain-computer interface as it's also known, is to give us the ability to connect our brains to computers such that a computer would be able to read the real-time activities in the brain while also giving computers the ability to affect the brain by providing it with programmed stimuli. By reading directly from the brain, a computer is able to receive instantaneous commands through thinking processes as opposed to relying on speech or typing in order to receive those commands. Moreover, the computer is able to receive as input subconscious brain activities that we're unable to express as commands or instructions, creating a new venue for humans to control machines. By providing the brain with direct stimuli, the machine is able to respond to commands by directly causing the answer to be perceived in our conscience without the requirement of using any other sensorial system in the process. In theory, a computer could make you see without using your eyes, taste without using your tongue, smell without using your nose, and feel without touching you physically. It would also be able to transfer experiences, knowledge, and instructions at a much faster rate between humans and machines, and even between humans, while using machines as intermediaries in the transmission process. The combination of reading and writing can also help patients bypass spinal cord injuries to regain complete control of their bodies. Anxiety, stress, and several psychological illnesses could be treated with such technology. And there is also the possibility of augmenting the human by adding different appendages, sensorial abilities, and even the ability to control other humans or animals through this technology. Neuralink is a company founded by Elon Musk with the goal of creating a brain-machine interface device that is seamless, easy to implant, and with an incredibly high precision that would allow for all of the above to become a reality. Last week, they unveiled a device called the Link, along with a surgical robot capable of autonomously implanting the device in under 1 hour and without requiring general anesthesia. The ultimate goal is to have those robots distributed all over the world, allowing for massive implantation of the device at a cost comparable to LASIK surgery. The unveil demonstrated a pig that has undergone the procedure of implantation and removal of the device, as well as pigs that still have one or more devices still implanted and fully operating. There is still a long way to go with this technology, but it left us with a certainty that we're closer than ever to the point in time in which we'll be able to decide whether or not we want to have this implant and with a couple $1,000s and a quick surgical procedure, you become an augmented human. With that in mind, should I start saving for my Neuralink implant? Let's start by getting the position of our team members. Let's start with Fernando. Are you thinking of getting in line to receive one of those implants? And are you going to start putting some money aside to get one of those devices when they become available, Fernando?
Hello. Well, actually, not really. I wouldn't be a early adopter of such kind of technology. I will probably wait for some years, possibly, to see how safe it is and see about the privacy concerns and everything else. And also, the price would probably go down during this time. So I would see everyone else using it before I would jump in.
Okay. What about you, Igor?
Okay, so I agree with Fernando. Personally, I don't like the idea of changing my body in any way, mainly because of the consequences that you can have with this. So for sure, I won't be one of the first to test it. But what worries me most is that with the improvements those implants can bring, it ends up making me be forced to use those chips to be able to compete at the same level as people who use. So in the end, I may end up using one of those chips, I think.
Cool. What about you, Camilla?
I definitely would not be an early adopter of the link. However, if as I get older and I feel the need to improve my body, my memories, and link might be able to do that, then I would go for it. So maybe I can take a part of my retirement to implant a link in me. What about you, Harley?
Well, usually early adopters pay more for the same product and get all the bugs. I don't want to be a beta tester when it comes to my brain. I think humans, as of today, we know very little of the brain. We see it as a black box overall, and we just poke and prod at it to see what happens. And I think making a chip and plug it into our brain is a little bit of we're being very courageous in doing so. I'll play along just like everyone else and Fernando and Igor, I mean, and then wait a little bit to see. Let everyone else test it and see how it works. How about you, Juan?
Well, I think I'm not very fond of changing something on my body. As Igor said, it's a different idea for me. But I already think about saving money to do it because it's something that I would really like to try. If I have the things under control and I have the exactly idea of what am I sharing and the security, and if I ran under no risk, I would have no problem with being a better tester for it, as you said.
Interesting. Well, I'm of the opinion that this is something that should be thoroughly tested. And once it's proven beyond doubt that it's completely safe, then I would start thinking of considering an implant of this nature. But I am not going to start saving, and I'm not going to hold my breath for it at this point. So interesting. We're 5-1 now. So let's get back to Juan then. So Juan, do you think that it's going to be completely safe in terms of health? Let's just disregard the topic that you brought in of data privacy. Let's just think of health issues and consequences of using an implant of this nature. You think that it's proven to be safe? You expect it to be safe, and are you willing to accept some risk to yield the benefits of that kind of device?
Well, when you talk about this device, I'm figuring out that you are saying something about a device that's already tested, it's already on production and ready to be implanted on people's brains. Because this is not the case with Neuralink. With Neuralink, we have a lot of problems, especially because there were some cases in which they didn't say what happened to the to the pigs which they tested, and something happened to them, and they didn't say this information right now. So it's kind of tricky to say that I would be able to use this Neuralink like this. This is right now. I have no problem of using a new technology like that. I think this is really the future. We are going to control everything with this kind of device. But my only concern is about security, risk, and control in general, because these are the things I'm really worried about. I don't think it will be unhealthy, or I don't know, it will bring damage to my body because it's already tested. So what's the problem with that? If it's tested, it's okay. What do you think?
Oh, so in my opinion, whenever you undergo a surgical procedure, there is always a risk, right? They're trying to mitigate these risks by automating the process using a very precise robot and techniques that are easy to control. So, for example, putting your scalp back, they're using super glue, which is how we tend to close some wounds these days. Anyways, we're not depending on the kind of incision that you have. You don't need to use suture. You don't need to sew the wound in order to close the skin. So that's easy. That's quick. And have very low consequences to the patients. However, I really have a problem with losing a piece of my skull. I think that drilling my skull and removing that permanently, it's a source of potential infection, inflammation of my brain. It's the skull is there as a barrier. It's a natural barrier that keeps our brain safe. So I know that there are medical procedures. If you go and you have an accident, or if you undergo surgery, then doctors know how to remove pieces of your skull and protect the brain appropriately. But still, this is a by need basis. It's not something that you do unless you really have a risk of death. If you if you don't do it, then you would otherwise die. And this is not the case with Neuralink. Having said that, I'm not sure if the technology is going to remain in this format. It could evolve to be something else. So in the past, we've been used to conducting surgeries by opening on top of the area that you want to do the surgery. These days, we just make holes, drive equipment and cameras, and we operate a person using robots, robotic arms. And you don't end up with those big incisions and the consequences of it. So I think that the evolution of this would be to implant the Neuralink under the skull using a catheter or a similar technique, such that you would be able to contain the structure of your skull and protect your brain a little bit better. But I do have concerns. I'm not a neurosurgeon, but brain is a very sensitive wet hardware that you don't want to mess with. You can end up with lasting consequences. Is that the same kind of thinking that you guys have, or what is it that drives you guys just say, no, I'm not ready for this, other than not willing to be a beta tester and the health consequences and data privacy?
Well, I want to point out something first. When it comes to the risk of the harm it can cause, the physical harm, I want to bring up an example. Laser surgery for the eyes a couple years ago was something that would make people very scared. Imagine having a laser pointing to your eye that could potentially bleed you permanently. And nowadays, it's such a well-tested and well-developed um, and mature technology that, yeah, sure, I'm willing to have my laser surgery so that I can see better, not having to worry about glasses, which to people who use glasses can be a hassle overall. I think it's the same thing when it comes to the harm it will do when cutting your skin, when injecting that into your brain. As time goes along, it's gonna get safe. That's not the cause as to why I wouldn't want to use it. To me, it's simply the fact that I don't want to have my brain tested on, because sure, the technology will evolve in a way where we manage to implant this safely and in a way that we're not going to cause permanent damage or harm. However, what is it going to be doing there? We don't even know what every part of the brain does. We don't even know what each neuron does and how they all operate. We have just overall um, analysis. We just watch it over time and kind of understand a little bit. We can pretty much, the bigger chunks of the brain and what they do overall. We don't know what each part does. And to me, we don't have enough reasons to go in yet. That's to me the reason, the major reason why I wouldn't want to do it.
Okay, that's fair.
I yeah, the same as Harley. I think for regular people to use the link, or even myself, I should have a need for that. So they might have to create a need for that. Besides studies and research and other things that they might try in people with some problems, and to expand and know more about the brain using the link. For regular people, link, it needs to be as useful as it is mobile phone right now, a smartphone. So we use it every day, but there are no risks by using a cell phone, correct? Like, I guess, beside data privacy and other things, like for health, well, actually right now it's affecting mental health somehow, but because of social media, not specifically because of the mobile phone. So I need to feel the need to use. So if I'm suffer from something that the link can solve the problem, as like memory loss, or Alzheimer, or maybe they can fix somehow mental health issues just using link, I would go for that. But I need to have a need for that. I would not try just because out of curiosity. Is not something for me. And I'm super afraid of surgeries. I never had one before. And yeah, however, adding to that, another question that I would like to raise is that some people so easily get plastic surgery because they want to improve their body and feel better about themselves. Wouldn't people start doing that to improve their minds and feel better about themselves if they are able to with the link?
I think absolutely. Some of the issues that you mentioned, I don't think that the link is able to cure yet, such as Alzheimer, dementia, memory issues, because of the area in which it actuates. But we can clearly see a future in which it could be helpful. It could help in revert some of those illnesses. Um, but the idea with say that they get FDA approval and you're an early adopter and you want to take the link the way it is right now and you want to use it, the idea is that you would implant it in the region of your brain that you want to work with. So if you want to work with vision, you would implant around vision, the area of your brain that corresponds to processing of visual stimuli coming from the optical nervous. So in that case, you would be able to read the stimuli coming from that region, and you would over time learn what that stimuli means. And by looking at things, by moving your eyes, or by certain activities that you identify in that region, you could create action. action somewhere else outside of your body. Or it could also be inside of your body. You could create a feeling based on something that you see. Or, for example, you could project an image or a rudimentary image in your vision, or what is perceived as a vision. Not any is not going to go anywhere near your eyes, but it's going to be perceived in a conscious level as vision. Uh, uh, Coordinates or directions that you're facing. So if I'm facing north, I would see something like an N in my vision. So I know that I'm facing north. Or if I'm turning, I would start to see my direction change according to the direction that I'm facing relative to Earth. So that's one way that you could feel like, yeah, I would love to have this. If I'm out in the woods and I don't have GPS, or I don't have the ability to localize myself, that's incredibly helpful. So you would be one of those guys that can use this device right away and have that kind of benefit. It can also respond to certain body conditions. So if it perceives some kind of excitement or stress levels, or some kind of heightened activity in an area that causes you trouble, you can use that to counter with other stimuli to make you feel better. I can think of that for athletes trying to improve their practice. So if you are trying to, and that would go for Fernando, for a bow shooter, and you're trying to better improve your technique, you can create stimuli to reinforce the correct position faster, and counter stimuli to cause you to avoid positioning that is not as effective. So that way you can accelerate your training. And nobody would know that he's got a neuralink in his brain unless they do an X-ray. So I can see athletes thinking about using these techniques and this device to improve themselves. But ultimately, if I'm sick, say I had a spinal cord injury or I have any other disability, then this device right now can help you speak, can help you see, can help you hear, can help you move things, it can help you be more independent. It can potentially help you alleviate pain. So all of those things, if the device were to be available right now, there are people right now that could benefit from those devices. So,
actually,
go ahead.
Thinking of, thinking of what you're saying makes me realize one point. Maybe for prime time, it's not ready yet. But one of the reasons I use as to why it's not is because the brain is a black box. We don't know what goes on in there. We just know what happens, and we try to understand. And this could be like this for decades before we know what's really going on. Maybe we'll never find out. But maybe tools like this could be what we need to actually start understanding what happens within it. So maybe there could be a bit of a scientific license. For example, having certain specific people in extreme cases of pain or something like that, that given the proper conditions are allowed to have one because they're willing to, and they would benefit from it. In a way, the science would also benefit from it as well. So I guess using it to understand how the brain works, so that in the future we can then actually use it properly in the consumer level, could make sense as well. In that sense, I agree with it. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I definitely agree. It would probably be a way to not only improve the way we understand the brain and the product itself, but also to evaluate the long terms, what happens in the long term. They said in the presentation, for example, that they implanted it in a pig and removed it, and they showed the pig happy and so on. But what happens in 10 years, or in maybe less, in 5 years, for example? We don't know if it somehow creates some kind of damage that for long term and something like that. I think that would be good not only to evaluate, to increase our knowledge about the brain, but also to evaluate on the long term before it comes to everyone else.
Yeah, I don't think that's the problem here because, technology it's amazing and we are having some improvements, and we for sure have to know how these work. But what I'm trying to say, it's like what Adriano said about athletes. Think we have an option to increase our brain capabilities, so or our skills. Don't you think that all athletes are going to use this as like a doping, and they don't care about their health? I think that's a problem, and that will be very common for anyone.
Yeah, I mean,
Everyone.
we're going to start to get into a time where people have those implants you have no idea they have, and they start to develop in certain ways that it becomes hard to compete if you don't have that equipment. Then it gets into doping. It's like, is that equivalent to doping? My impression is yes, but then if everybody's using, or if you're using that for medical reasons, then you end into all of those ethical discussions, and it's very hard to navigate. All of a sudden, if you have a medical condition, then you wouldn't be allowed to use it because you're an athlete, or if everybody's using, then now you're not allowed to use because you're an athlete, right? If I'm allowed to use to improve something in my life, and I'm not an athlete, I don't have anything to worry about doping. But now you're going to have this population of athletes that compete for a living, and they're not going to be able to compete with me, having the device and having the ability to achieve a higher level they can. So it's a weird future to even think from the paradigm, from the perspectives that we have right now. Just quickly going over some interactions that we're having on the chat. I see that Thales said, besides the price tag, don't you guys consider this implant quite dangerous, since any type of surgery in the brain area is risky? And yes, that's something that we discuss here, and it is risky. It might not be as risky as open heart surgery and some other surgical procedures, but there is a risk. And if we're talking about the risk of losing a limb versus damaging your brain, you could be talking about a much worse consequence that may compensate the lower risk. Everybody has a different threshold when it comes to that, but mine is pretty low. And that's why I said no. But Juan's, it's not that low. So for him, it's worthwhile. It's worthwhile to improve himself, to be able to know more about himself through this system, such that he's willing to risk. And that's something that there is no right or wrong answer. Is really how you feel about it and what you want to do. And you're the owner and the agent of your own life, so you're supposed to be the one making that kind of decision. We have another interaction here from Marcelo. He said, my view of the Neuralink is it should work like a pacemaker, the implantation of a pacemaker in heart surgery. It is something that alters your body, but it has a benefit to treat symptoms or even know of some hormone dysfunction. Like as a clinical depression patients, it could monitor them and advance in a new treatment. And yes, Neuralink is actually pushing this for this reason. They want to solve health issues. They want to end suffering, and that's the language that they used in the presentation last week. They even got this acceptance from FDA as a breakthrough treatment. It's being evaluated as a breakthrough treatment, which is kind of like an approval to explore a radical technique that is risky, but that can bring great advancements and a lot of suffering. So their goal is to start treating patients with spinal cord injuries and people who are paraplegic or tetraplegic. They would be able to recover some movement. They would be able to communicate better and be more independent. So they're targeting that area, solving health issues. But we're dreaming high because as the same tool can be used to do many other things if you had access to. And there is no indication that Neuralink is going to limit the implantation to only those that have a medical condition. And to be fair, this is also what Elon Musk talks about. He's talking about using Neuralink to be a remedy or some kind of insurance against an evil general artificial intelligence that would have the tendency to eliminate humanity. If we have the ability to interface our limited brains with powerful computers, then we might have a fighting chance against evil general artificial intelligence. And this is like almost science fiction discussion, but that's something that he said, and that's his thinking, is that we can augment ourselves, that we can improve our bodies, that we can be so much better that we can now compete with computers. So it's clearly not a device designed exclusively to solve suffering and help those that have been damaged in some way or suffer with diseases.
Well, I want to point something out. In the recent news where they use pigs for testing, I'm sure there's a lot of people who are going to bring up the fact that you're testing on animals, and I think that that's a problem as well. That's going to be there's going to be many groups of people defending against that, and I think it's also very dangerous to just allow that to be allow people to implement these in their brains as well. I think from one side you have evolution. You need to be able to evolve. You need to be able to test things out to find out. That's how drugs have been discovered. That's how medicines were discovered. How things evolve. So I think naturally that's going to have to be. That's one side of it. But on the other side, you have making sure that, for example, the government doesn't allow prisoners who are sentenced life in prison, for example, to be tested on, for example, stuff like that. So these two extremes are real, and I think that the truth lies within somewhere in the middle. And I think this is just another topic where we have to do this analysis of an extreme and another one. And I would like to know your opinion on this, Fernando and Igor. What do you guys think is where do we stand on this?
Well, it's a very hard topic in general. I think there will be a lot of discussion. We can, for example, right now, talking about other things that they are kind of similar, but related to other technology. For example, self-driving cars. There are a lot of discussion about the ethical part of it. And I think there will be also a lot of discussion about this part too, about the animals, how it's used, and everything else. I don't think we'll have some answers for quite some time. I think we'll spend quite some time to come to some conclusions about that. But I think we should raise every kind of concern we have about the animals, about the usage of this technology, and everything else. I think we should really start discussing right now, and instead of waiting for it to be in the next phases of development.
Yeah, that's a hard question because I think what the science are trying to do now is to use animals with the brain more similar to ours, and of course that emerges a question of ethical problems and in the future it will be worst because you need to start to test this in humans, and not just for a small time, but for a long one, because we can have many problems. And for I don't know, a chip that are implemented for 2 or 3 years, I don't know, and that's always a big problem. And I personally do not have an opinion about this, but I don't think we have an option to. So we need to test it. That's it.
This is not a new discussion. This is not something that was invented by Neuralink, testing in animals, right? So we've been having these ethical discussions for decades. And reality is that you only achieve some development in certain areas if you use platforms that are analog to humans. Certain things you can simulate without animals, others it's just too risky for you to afford a human to experiment before you have animals experimenting too. So what is considered ethical these days is procedures that minimize the pain and suffering, that provide the animals with the best chances of survival and least chances of feeling pain, and limiting the consequences that they have from procedures, and also limit the amount of animals that you conduct your procedures. So you should not be doing this lightly. So it's not because you can have 1,000 pigs that you're going to test in 1,000 pigs. You're going to test in as fewer as possible, in as few animals as you can possibly test, to have the ability to start testing on humans. And that's what seems to be happening with Neuralink. Granted that they had a little bit of a obscure past with animal testing. There was this time when they were trying to do an implant of a device that actually had 10,000 sensors. I think in a goat, and it was a bit of a catastrophic implant, and that raised a few questions at that time. But now it seems that they're not having that kind of problem anymore, and that was not. It was kind of like this startup culture of like trying to push hard, break things quickly, and move fast. And it seems that they're understanding this better now, and they're giving proper attention to animal treatment. But there is no other way that we're going to achieve this kind of development unless we use human analogs such as pigs, monkeys, before we try in humans. Now, the idea with the application for FDA that they got approved last month, actually 2 months ago, was that once they prove that the device is safe and it's not having any lasting consequences in those animals, they're going to start testing with humans. But now with humans that have health issues that grant the risk. So I'm a paraplegic, and I'm willing to undergo the risk in order to recover some of my independence, reduce some of my suffering. And those are the kinds of trials that really matter, and the trials that now we're going to start to experiment, not with an analog platform anymore, but with humans. That's when we're going to start to have the real development and start to yield the benefits that we're talking here, like trying to issue commands in a subconscious level, understand health issues, interact with the computer, which is hard to convince a pig to do, or even a monkey. So there are ethical issues, but it's not special. It's not something new because of Neuralink. I can think of many other research experiments that they have to do in animals that are a lot more inhumane and that cause a lot more suffering than the implementation of this chip. Going back to the chat here, Nathan asked, shouldn't we consider Neuralink for people with health issues at the moment? And that's exactly what Neuralink is doing. Even though they dream of future uses, the procedure the process that they're trying to take to get to the dreams that could come true with Neuralink is being paved through trying to get Neuralink to help people with health conditions.
So I want to ask something. It seems to be clear that this technology is in our future. We don't know if it's the next decade or next 100 years, but it seems that at some point we're gonna having 3D projections of GPS routing added to your vision, or any kind of all these sci-fi technologies you can imagine that would be possible. It'd be like an app, just like you install an app in a phone. You'd be able to install a GPS routing in a way that you'd pretty much just think where you want to go, and you'd see the path added to your vision, and all kinds of things like that. All these things are going to start becoming ubiquitous, and they're going to start being part of our daily lives. Will we reach a point where not having any app, let's call it like that, not having any additional bonuses in our body, will that become so old styled that it make no sense? And if that happens, will humans, the human race, have evolved to a point where we're not just humans anymore, and the ones that are just humans are like outdated and are not able to get a job or go to school? What do you think about this, Adriano?
Oh, that's certainly a possibility. If everybody has an implant, and everybody that can afford have an implant, and it's safe enough that now it has crossed the chasm. Now it's mainstream. Now you have several different apps. You have several different upgrades that you can have for that device. Some people have multiple of them. It's very well developed, such that there are many ways that you can already be augmented by implanting this device. You're going to end up with a portion of the population that is unwilling or unable to acquire the device, and unfortunately, you're going to have a portion of the population that cannot compete with those that have. That's plain logic that follows the existence of the device. And even if, say, government is going to afford this device for everybody, even if the government affords this to everybody, there are those who are going to be unwilling or unable, due to health conditions, to use the device. So you end up with this portion of the population that is unable to compete with those that have the device. But then again, we're going to be possibly humans in a society that needs to compete with computers. So one thing follows the other. And as sad as it seems that we're going to have that kind of situation, I think that it's inevitable. There is no way that we're going to say, stop the car. Let's stop everything. Let's just stop AI. Let's stop brain-machine interface. Let's just not talk about this ever again. There is no way that you're going to convince everybody, every other country, to stop the development of these technologies. Even if the United States and the Western civilization decides we're stopping it, I don't see how Russia and China and some other countries are going to see eye to eye with us and follow suit. They're probably going to continue development, and if we don't go back to the development of those technologies, then we're going to be a huge chunk of the population that, as opposed to a smaller chunk of the population, being subject to this condition. It is worrying, and in a sense, just addressing the other part of your question, yes, we're going to have augmented humans that now have different appendages, have different sensorial abilities. So think about it. If I have an implant and I upload an app, and now I can see different electromagnetic frequencies, which includes different light spectrums and radio frequencies. So I have abilities that are non-human. Now I have experiences that are non-human. We can't feel like a fish because we don't have fins. We don't live in water. We don't have those appendages. We don't have the same sensorial abilities they have. And therefore, we cannot understand or have the experience of what being a fish is. But with one of those implants, you can have different experiences and sensorial abilities than a human does. And now you're something completely different. Your brain structure is going to change to accommodate these new abilities, to make sense of them. Now you're going to have memories and experiences based on it. You're going to be something different than a human. There is no other way to cut this. It's a different animal. And even if say, I could, for example, I have an implant, and now I can have a third arm. And this arm is kind of like a R2D2 Swiss knife of tools that I can control with my brain. If I can't control with my brain, it becomes a new appendage. It becomes a new actuator that I have access to. Therefore, I have new experiences. I have new sensorial abilities, and I have capabilities that are superhuman. So definitely, we're either going to feel less human, or those that do not have the implant are going to feel less new human.
So what about hackers hacking our minds? I think that's will be possible, right?
I think so. Wherever there is a computer, there is the possibility of hacking. And they addressed this concerning the Q&A during the event last week, saying that they're using cryptography and authentication, and they're taking this seriously. But listen, this is a small device which is transmitting in radio frequency. And by definition, there is no way that you can prevent anyone from reading what the device is beaming out to your phone or the other device that receives the signals. Given enough time, I'll be able to hack it. I'll be able to break that code, and I'll be able to listen in, tap into whatever the neuralink is transmitting to the other device, and I'll know exactly what's going through your brain. So this is kind of like the ultimate. When we talk about privacy, now, most of our lives live in phones and computers, and we struggle to give access to apps and systems to what comes to be a huge chunk of our lives that we have in a digital format. But at the end of the day, someone hacks into my emails, if someone hacks into my social media accounts, they're going to have a portion of myself. If someone hacks into my brain, there is nowhere else I can go. There is no more privacy, period. And you can think, I could have put in a small piece of paper and locked in a vault deep in the Swiss Alps. Well, if you wrote it, then it's somewhere in your brain. You know of the existence of it, you know of the content, and therefore no more privacy. So there is a huge privacy risk there.
Yeah, I think it's not just that, but it will be possible to become those chips as a weapon. For example, we can hack a chip and do an overclocking and increase their temperature. So that's possible. You cause some damage in the brain. So yeah, there is a lot of risk there.
Well, if there is an EMP attack or just an EMP accident, because you can have electromagnetic pulses that are accidental, you could fry the device that's sitting on top of your brain. What's going to happen? Is it going to transmit electrical signals signals into your brain and perhaps even kill that area, cause permanent damage, burn the cells around it, what's going to happen? It's just an EMP. Now you have the device. People know you have the device. There's a bunch of people in the same area with the device. All you need to know is cause an EMP, and now you have a bunch of people with brain damage or dead. So talk about terrorist attacks and security issues. How do you prevent that? Like, it just takes a huge generator or a huge motor, electrical motor, to just malfunction, and you end up in this condition.
Oh, I think those are certain concerns I hadn't actually thought about myself, but I'm sure that would be able to find a way around it, some sort of EMP defense mechanisms.
There is a way for you to insulate for EMP. Essentially, you're doing a Faraday cage around the device to protect it. But when you do the Faraday protection, you're also preventing signals from the radio frequency to leave and communicate with the other device that receives the signal. So there are technical issues. There are possible solutions, but definitely technical issues and security problems that this could implicate in the future.
I believe that those security questions are serious. Once it gets to your mind, it knows everything you've ever known. But I think there's probably some sort of some path down where we can go with security. One thing we cannot defend against is the following concept. Assuming that we're able to interface with the brain and simulate every input and output, we would be able to simulate thoughts, memories. We could potentially implant 20 years of memories that never happened in your mind. You could potentially make you think you are somewhere where you're not. Feel the breeze, see a city where you've never been, and implement dreams and everything. So in a sense, how would you ever be able to tell if you are in a simulation or if you are actually in the real world with some of the inputs being messed with? That's, to me, the ultimate question that would never know. And even if this already happened and we are living in a simulation that happened after our civilizations reached the point where we're supposing we're going to reach. And that's, I don't know if there's an answer to that one. What do you guys think about this one?
You're talking about the ultimate virtual reality without goggles, right? And no limits whatsoever. What do you guys think?
Yeah, and speaking of which, I don't know if you know Sword Art Online. It's a Japanese series that they created a virtual reality world. That's a game, basically. And, well, given that it would be possible, what would happen to the social relationships? Like, probably a bunch of people would be inside this virtual world the whole day, possibly, and they would not experience the real world for quite some time. And how do we deal with that?
Well, that's Ready Player One, Inception, all together, right? Now you have a Neuralink experience of you having a Neuralink experience. It's kind of like a nested mess. And how do you get out of it and realize what's reality? And just borrowing some of the Inception concept, if you can have an experience, then perhaps you can have that experience in a shorter period of time. So now you can travel to a city like Harlei mentioned, but that only takes 2 seconds, but it becomes in your memory months of time in terms of experiences that you had in that city. But it only took a few seconds for you to go through this experience in reality. So that kind of neatly goes into the question that Nathan just posed on the chat. It said, does this brings us closer to immortality? If we can keep the brain alive and with this tech, then we can live, or even if our bodies are gone. So I guess this question is, so is this something that we can use to achieve immortality by transferring our consciousness to another body or to another being or to another robot? And that's something that Elon Musk mentioned. This is something that it's being well explored and hoped for by many different people. There's one prominent one is Ray Kurzweil in his book Singularity is Near. He talks about this possibility of having essentially a copy, a dump of your brain at any given time that you can restore into another medium, and that medium becomes you again. And you, by that way, you can revive someone that passed away that is loved, and you can have that person back again. In a sense, experiencing things in an accelerated form makes you immortal as well, because you can experience a lot more than you could in a lifetime, and makes life feel much longer than it is. And time is really something that we struggle to understand, and it might ultimately be just a human construct. And if we're manipulating time in such a way that we now have accelerated experiences, then that, you know, and we can still live 80, 90, 100, perhaps even more years, then you're essentially multiplying your existence by measure of the amount of experiences you have in that amount of time. And Marcelo is saying, you guys are getting into matrix kung fu learning. And yes, that's one possibility, is you have the implant and now you travel to China. You know nothing of Mandarin, but then you sync your brain with an app and now you're speaking fluent Mandarin. So it's in essence matrix stuff. You can do uploads to your brain. Absolutely. So we're almost there. Final thoughts from you guys.
See, this makes me want to think about life and what it means. It's very deep. This is very powerful things we're thinking about. If you go anywhere near this in the next 100 years, it'd be more than amazing. If even a fraction of this happens at all, it'd be pretty insane. And I think if it were to ever happen, this is definitely the beginning of it. In my opinion, these are the first steps towards that for sure.
I believe before it was already difficult to define what is really me, what am I as a human, as a conscious being. Now will be even harder. And thinking about Neuralink, I think we should already start thinking, not so in a philosophical way, but if we have something attached to us, like implanted in us, are we really human beings, or we should call ourselves a different race already? So it's something that we should start thinking about. Not that this will happen now, but thinking about before it started happening, because definitely will happen, like from my view.
Yeah, I believe that all these ideas that we had that we could use, probably we might not experience all that, maybe when we are very, very old, but probably our kids, the next generations will probably have more of that. And I think that maybe we should start preparing them for this kind of stuff, teaching something related to that, and our kids and something like that.
Yeah, for me, I think this conversation really changed my mind. I will start saving some money per month, and maybe in the next decade, I'll be able to implant some chips. And I know it's not be like we are talking here, but it's be cool, I think. So
you're thinking of multiple already.
What's a great talk, guys.
So multiple holes in your skull.
Yeah.
It's gonna be like piercing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. How about you, Juan?
Well, as the time passes and AI evolves, and we see such technologies coming to coming to our hands. I keep thinking that we are going to reach a moment in which the important about our lives are going to be what kind of human being we are, because with such technology, with such power in our hands and evolving the information technology as fast as we are evolving right now, we are going to reach a time in which maybe we won't need to work that much. Maybe we will spend the time doing cool stuff and sharing intelligence, sharing knowledge, And actually, I have a good feeling about the future with such
Oh,
technologies.
it turns out that we might have a chance against evil general artificial intelligence if we get into sharing the knowledge and compounding the human experience, and use computers to extend our capabilities. Guys, I really appreciate your time and all the interaction we got here on the chat. Thank you so much for this discussion, and looking forward to see you guys again next week. We're going to be publishing the topic for the next discussion on our blog. If you look in the description, you see the links to our blog. And thanks again. See you guys.